everybody to masinahikan iskwêwak. My name is Kayla, and we are here for another thrilling episode of the Book Women.
And I'm Tanya.
I'm here too. And I'm Sheila, and we're here with our guest, Marilyn Dumont. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Marilyn. I've lived in the Edmonton area now for probably, about 30 years. I grew up in Sundre, Alberta. My parents were from Métis settlement and Onion Lake Reserve. And I teach Indigenous Lit and creative writing here at the U of A.
And how long have you been writing for? Is it something you've always been doing?
No, I wrote as a teenager, but like in a journal. But the thing is that I guess I just thought, well, all teenagers do this, angst venting in a journal or something. So no one took it seriously, and neither did I. Just put it away. And then probably in my 30s, a friend of mine read a little passage from her journal to me, and I thought, Dory, that's amazing. I want to do that. Mm-hmm. So I started writing in a journal just because I wanted to someday think, I'll read this to one of my friends or family, and they'll be taken on this journey with my writing. That's really what my goal was.
Yeah.
It wasn't to publish, it was to write.
Did you keep your journals from when you were a teenager?
Or revisit them?
You know what, about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I had boxes of these journals, and I thought, do I really want to keep these? Do I really want my family to read these things when I'm gone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I said no, and I chucked them because I thought, I don't want my family to read this when I'm gone, or my friends. So I edited, I kept some, but mostly threw the lot out because I thought, this is going to be like an albatross, me carrying these around for the rest of my life, and I don't want to do that. So I got rid of most of them.
Mm-hmm. I got rid of my angsty teen journals as soon as I could. Yeah.
I think I only have one teen journal that's still kicking around somewhere in our house. And then actually something that I wrote in a little thing when I was probably about maybe 8 years old, and I was just so mad at my parents that day, but it's very dramatic, and I was like, oh man. Like reading it as an adult, you're like, wow, those issues. Also, like when you're a kid and you're like, holy. Yeah. But my angsty teen one, I keep it around because it's kind of funny to me now almost, being like, I thought I had all the world's problems on me, but really they were like very trivial compared to now, and it's just very self-centered. But I keep that one around, but I'm sure there's probably some other ones that just got, talking about boys, and I was in love with my next door neighbor, so I'm pretty sure I destroyed that one when he broke up with me. So
I never kept a journal. Well, my very first journal was when I was in about grade 5, when I was really young, and I still have it. But what happened was my older sister, she took my journal and brought it to her classroom and read it out loud to all of her friends, and it was so mortifying. I know, it was so traumatic. So I vowed to myself never to write my feelings down, and I regret that. I regret that a lot.
Do you write your feelings down now?
Sometimes. Sometimes when I blast the music and smash my keyboard, that's how I do it.
Do you still write in a journal, Marilyn?
Yep.
Oh yeah,
I do.
Right in front of you. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, I still do. I mean, not as much as I used to.
Right.
Before I got this job at the university 3 years ago, going on 4, I wrote a lot more, but I just don't have the energy or time to do it with the full-time teaching.
Yeah.
It takes a lot out of you, hey?
Yeah, it does. A lot. It's the teaching, but it's also the committee work.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, I've kind of decided, okay, summertime is when I'm going to be really, hitting my journal and writing, rather than trying to do it through the term. Mm-hmm. It's just too much. And I find for me that it's a different kind of time. It's a different sense of time that you have to be in. You can't be like, I've got a meeting in an hour, so I'm gonna really work on this poem. It's like, it doesn't really work like that for me.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes too, especially when you are teaching, like I find when Tanya and I teach, sometimes a lot of the emotions that students are feeling, like they start getting reflected on me, and then I don't want that to necessarily come out and be reflective of any writing that I'm doing, just because like being a bit of an empath with other students. And I think, and also you get in this weird headspace sometimes, especially around exams or when you have to do all the marking of papers. And then, I'd rather just take the summer to, kind of reflect on myself before having to go into the chaos of September, which is coming up soon.
Yes.
And all the student orientations.
Yes. Exactly.
Is there anything that you do, Marilyn, to prepare for writing, or just is there any sort of like rituals and things that you do? Yeah.
Lots of reading. Like if I want to get back into my writing, I'm usually reading a lot first, and then just kind of noodling around in my journal with different things. But it's interesting that I had an old boyfriend who actually gave me some of my poems that I wrote, or some of my work. I won't really call them poems. Some of my writing that I did when I was like mid-teens, 13, 14, 15, 16 in there. And when he handed them to me, I thought, and this was just about 2 years ago, he gave them back to me because I forgot all about them. And I thought, oh, do I really want to read these? I'm not sure. Anyways, when I opened it up, it was like, not one of them was like, that's not bad. Pretty good for. Wow. And I was really surprised. It was like, oh my God, like I had something going there. I don't know what it was, but it was, So one of the 3 or 4 of them was like, Hey.
Not bad.
Not bad.
That's great.
Instead of being totally horrified, like at all of them, right?
Right.
So that was good to know.
So I know our podcast is about writing, editing, and publishing, and I know that you have many books out. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about the collections that you've written?
Yeah, I mean, A Really Good Brown Girl, of course, is still around and being published and probably will outlast me. But, it's almost if when you look back at your yearbooks, that's what it feels like looking back at A Really Good Brown Girl. It sort of looks like maybe just moving in maybe to senior high. Finished junior high, move into senior high. And so it's really, when I look back at them, they really do feel like my younger selves.
Yeah.
Because the process of putting them together was, at different ages, but also, different investigations, different questions that I'm wanting to investigate. So it's almost like, they're different personalities. So I don't know how else to talk about them other than A Really Good Brown Girl really was kind of a very adolescent kind of coming to terms with being Métis in Alberta and what that meant, and all of the erasure and that kind of things. I think that book will be around a lot longer than I am. What did I write after that? I wrote Green Girl Dreams Mountains, and that book was written actually when I was doing my master's at UBC. That was really about, I wrote a section there on family that I'm probably most proud of in terms of my poetry. Because I think it deals with some really, really hard, difficult issues around family and how to portray them in a way that is honest but is also compassionate. Yeah. That was a really hard section of that book to write, but I think I'm proud of that section. That Tongued Belonging was something I wrote in the process of being writer-in-residence at the University of Alberta, University of Windsor, University of Toronto, and there's some poems in there about Windsor, about Toronto, but also about Indigenous women and the strength of Indigenous women. And then Pemmican Eaters took me into some historical research, reading historical memoirs, reading as much as possible of the time period that I was writing so that I could recreate the language of that time. So Pemmican Eaters was a different process where I did historical research and then I tried to fashion that into some kind of poetry. And so I'm still on that bent. I'm doing research now on Indigenous people in Edmonton and then writing poetry about them. My next book will be about Indigenous Edmonton.
That sounds amazing. I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, I'm quite happy with it. I had quite a breakthrough at Banff when I was there in May. And, I was doing all this research and stuff, and I was starting to get just tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, trying to keep close to the historical accuracy. And then I said, I'm not a historian. I'm a writer.
Yeah.
So I can do different things with this material. So, because I really hit a wall. It was like, ugh, I can't. And then all of a sudden it was like, yes, I can. I can make them superhuman. I can make them amazing people with, horses that fly and player pianos that, have murmuration of starlings coming out that turn into dry meat and then fall to the laps of characters' guests. So I can do stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So that was a wonderful but painful realization.
For sure. How was your experience at Banff? It sounds like you had
it's fantastic. Going there I was there for 5 weeks. It's fantastic.
Wow.
People think, well, why do you have to go to Banff to write? And what do you have to do? Is because basically everything is taken care of there. Your food is taken care of. Your room is cleaned every day by somebody else if you want. If you want it cleaned, if you don't, just say don't clean. Leave me alone. Writing.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's good there is that people care if you write.
Right.
Somebody was, oh, so how was your writing this morning, or what are you working on? Because in our general life, nobody asks that.
Right.
And really, nobody cares if you write or not, right? So having that affirmation of a community of people that are focused on their writing is really wonderful to be around.
And just to clarify for the listeners, that was at the Banff Center for the Arts?
Yeah, Banff Center for the Arts.
And was it a specific writer program that you were doing?
It was the May Writing Studios, where they have resource people. And I've done it before. I've been one of the resource people. And so you can choose to meet with those people or not. It's up to you. I only actually got feedback from one of the people that was there, but they try to bring in a variety of writers that may give you some different points of view on things. There were poets there. There were also fiction writers. So yeah, it's really great. It's very expensive. That's the only thing. But they do have bursaries.
Okay,
That's nice.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Is there a specific eligibility to go?
You have to submit a portfolio. And a number of other things. I don't know, resume, probably project description.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, and there were about 30 writers. So there were about 15 poets and then 15 fiction writers.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. We should do something like this at Métis Crossing.
Oh yeah, for
Yes,
sure.
that would be
Yeah, because they have those nice little tents there.
I will talk.
Just sit there and look on the river.
to Leon next weekend, not this weekend, next weekend, because I'm there.
Yeah.
And I said,
Surrounded by
could we
Saskatoon
possibly
berries.
do that?
Yeah.
As a group of Indigenous women writers, wouldn't that be great?
That would be amazing.
We would love to. I think I would be also down for shooting a podcast episode out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. In
I
one of
love
those little
that
trapper
idea.
tents.
Okay, let's do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to work on that together as a project? We can put money.
Yes.
I can
Sure,
start writing up.
absolutely.
We can.
Yeah, we're putting it
Yeah.
out there into the.
We are.
Into the
People are
universe.
gonna know.
People are gonna
We
know.
said that we would want to do this, but
Yeah.
No, I love that. Métis Crossing is so beautiful.
It
Sheila took
is.
us there last year, and it was so awesome.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, well, my family's kind of from up in that area, so every year I try and go up there at least once, and we start outside of Redwater and we take the old Victoria Trail. We printed off like the map that they have, so we go up there, me and my partner, and we just kind of do a day of like going to all the sites, and we usually go to the graveyards where my ancestors are buried.
Yeah,
and
mine too.
Yeah, so we go up there, we go to the old, we love driving up to the old cemetery on the very top of the hill,
Yeah.
because it's just so fun to drive up there, but it's also really interesting because only a few of the actual gravestones are there,
Right.
but you can see where the graves are because it's indented because old graves collapse. So just to think about like and it's such like a peaceful
It's gorgeous.
place, and it's like right above the North Saskatchewan, and
Yeah.
it's really beautiful. So I love going up there, and I like taking people up there because it's not too far from Edmonton, and it's a nice trip to do. Just
Beautiful.
and if you have time,
Nice.
stop at the Métis Crossing, stay overnight. They have a really nice campground.
Yeah. Well, now with that new center, they'll have a classroom in there
Oh, exciting!
that could be used just for, sharing
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
performance. If people wanted to perform their work at the end of a workshop or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyways, something to think about.
Yes,
Definitely.
exactly.
Something to do.
Something
There you
something
go.
to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Done. Okay.
Done. Okay. So,
You go ahead.
Okay. Well, I mean, we're both just burning with questions
I
now.
know.
You were talking about a little bit about a kind of responsibility or like accountability to your family in your writing, and I know Tanya and I had the privilege of coming out to Lac St. Anne and meeting a few of your family members. How does kind of your family or like the land that you're from influence your writing, or how does it kind of go with your writing, or does it?
It does. I mean, the Pemmican Eaters, and then, well, I mean, all of it does.
Yeah.
Because I'm usually writing about place and people and a time period, so I sort of feel like it's all connected in some way. I mean, I knew less at an earlier age about my ancestry in this area, so it just seems to get deeper and deeper and kind of more interesting and a lot more varied than what I thought it would have been. You know, so quite an interesting process, getting actually closer to the land and to the history.
Yeah. Is your family fairly receptive to your writing?
They are.
Yeah.
They are now.
Now. That's good now.
The key word in that sentence.
Yeah. They weren't at first.
Yeah.
I know that they had problems with A Really Good Brown Girl, published in '96, and I heard some through the grapevine
Yeah.
bad stuff about what family said about my book, but now they're all happy.
Yeah.
They're all very
Yeah.
pleased and everything. But I think that's definitely a risk that writers take, is that if you are going to write about yourself, very likely it will include your family, and people have to decide. But I think that's one of the things that writers have to decide. How will you handle it? I also had an aunt who contacted me and said, that's not how it was. I said, well, I have my understanding of it and you have yours, but it ain't changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's some very good advice too, especially for writers who are going to tell their own story. That we're accountable to our family, but we're also accountable like to ourselves, and we have to follow our truths when we're when we're telling our stories. But just to know that families, they're either going to love it or they're going to have something to say. And
Family always has something to say.
oh yeah, there's always that one auntie too that's like you can't please.
Giving you shit.
Yeah, that's true. And the thing is that people don't realize, like, everybody wants to write a book, but nobody knows that it's actually digging trenches and that it's really hard work, like emotionally hard work, and also just sitting and putting in the time. It's tedious, especially when it comes to editing process. So I would say that people always say, oh, I want to write a book. I'll say, okay, are you planning to spend a year doing this? Just even like on a good first draft? If you aren't, you may not get your book written. Because it's just hard slogging. And in some ways I feel sorry for fiction writers, because man, is there ever a lot of hard slogging if you're a fiction writer.
Yeah.
Oh man, the amount of words and time you put in, I just can't believe it.
Yeah.
It is. It's really hard work. And the number of people who have said to me, "Oh, I want to write a poetry book." Who do you read? They don't read poetry. Like, oh, so who's going to read you if you don't read poetry?
Right.
But it's true. Yeah. Like, many people want to write a book, because I've had this experience over and over and over as the writer in residence. So many people want to write books. Okay, you're willing to put in the work? No, I just want to have it. They don't want to actually put in the work, but they want to publish something.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the publishing process is huge too. Like, it's so many different stages.
It's different stages, and the whole publishing industry has changed. I mean, when I published A Really Good Brown Girl, there were many independent publishers in Canada, which has now been reduced to few, being bought up by conglomerates. And then the people who publish poetry don't make a profit. If they break even, they're happy. If you sell 500 books of poetry in Canada, that's a big deal. Then publishers are happy. So the writing and publishing of poetry is just becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. But the thing is, in terms of Indigenous lit right now, it's got cachet. So there's books being published that probably shouldn't be published, you know?
Mm-hmm. I've read some of those.
Yeah, just sort of think, wow, I wish you would have had a better editor. Mm-hmm. You know, because the editor can send people back and say, listen, you need to reinvest in this because it's not saying anything new. The language isn't challenging. Yeah, the whole world of publishing has changed dramatically, and it's also moved from where the publisher was most instrumental in the distribution and publicity, and now it's gone to the writer. They want you to have Twitter and Facebook accounts, like publishers want writers to have those, because you are the ones basically promoting your work.
Right.
Whereas before, the publisher did all the work, right?
Right.
As if you don't have enough to do, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
that's right. But also, distribution is huge. Like, the other thing about writing books is that people can write a book, but it'll be a doorstop unless it's distributed, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to find a good distributor. And the thing is, publishers don't always have good distributors. So you have to also find a publisher that is very active in distributing books. Like Brick Books, it was a godsend. It was a gift for me to publish first with Brick Books because they promote, and they promoted me. Mm-hmm. They did a book tour in 96, 97. Poetry publishers do not do book tours anymore. Mm-hmm. You'd be very surprised. It's very rare because they don't have the money for it. So yeah, publishing is really changed. It's nice to see that there are some more Indigenous publishers, and that publishers are also now taking the idea of Aboriginal editors a little bit more seriously than they were before. 5-10 years ago, they were not interested in Aboriginal editors.
Mm-hmm. I know that's a question that I actually wanted to ask you, because I know that in the books that you published, I think, was it Pemmican Eaters that you published with an Indigenous publishing house?
Nope, that one is ECW. I published That Tongue Belonging with Kagadon's Press.
Okay.
An Indigenous press, yeah.
Did you notice any difference working with an Indigenous press versus a non-Indigenous press?
Well, what's noticeable is the size of the press, rather than whether they're Indigenous or not. I mean, the size of the press, they're always struggling, and just they're hand to mouth. They have no money for extra anything, okay, unless they apply for money. Mm-hmm. But yes, small publishers are basically, they're like home-based businesses, basically. Mm-hmm. And so are many of our literary journals. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I know we are talking a lot about a really good brown girl, and I know that that's actually made the comprehensive exam list for the PhD students.
Are you reading it yet?
I've already.
Oh, okay. Long ago. You're like, I already read that.
Peoples and Plays was my favorite list.
So what list are you on now, just out of curiosity? Which one did you leave to the very end?
Governance. That's the worst one, but that's another story. I guess my question is, like, how does it feel as a writer and an author, like, having other people read and go through your book and pull out all these, like, I don't know, almost like, I don't want to say nitpicking, but looking at and analyzing your book? How does that feel? Because for me, I feel like that'd be really awkward.
It is awkward, and I prefer not to hear about it.
Okay.
No, but it's interesting because it's happened ever since it was published.
Yeah.
You know, like academics are looking at the work, and they're always, saying stuff. Some of it's, pretty spot on and sound, and some of it's kind of ridiculous. So I don't listen to it anymore, basically. I mean, when I stopped listening to it was around this story. What happened is that in the front of the book, there's a picture of me and my mother, and it was taken by a street photographer. So he just snapped the picture. I don't think he had any real plans for the photo. Well, anyway, somebody wrote this argument that because they couldn't see our feet in the photograph, my mother and my feet, that somehow this represented our dislocation from the land. I was like, okay, that's really pushing it. So at that point I thought, I'm not reading any more of this stuff.
Yeah. For the better. Protect your spirit.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
When people just get way too into it, you're like, I didn't mean that.
No, I didn't.
All.
I didn't mean that at all.
Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, It's a photograph. I didn't even take it, and the photograph was taken that split second.
Yeah.
I don't think the guy decided at that point, oh, I'm going to cut their feet off so it will make them look dislocated from the land.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so I kind of stopped reading it. But, in some ways it doesn't really matter what other people think. In many ways it doesn't. I mean, I wrote it, it's there, it's that time and period, and it's not going to please everybody. And no, it wasn't your experience, but it was mine. That's the way I look at it. I can't write a book for other people. They have to take what they can from it and leave the rest. And no, my experience is quite different from other people's.
Yeah. Do you teach your own books in your
no,
classes?
Absolutely
No.
not. Absolutely
This is
not.
always a question that comes up for us. Like when we do our syllabus, we're like, do we have them read something that we wrote? Do we have them listen to it? Because this year we actually are including podcasts and just like alternative forms of learning or like supplementary to readings. And I'm just like, and that was one of the questions Tanya had, like, do they listen to us talking in a podcast? I was like, I don't know if students want to hear us that many hours a week. Also, like, there's a few, like, we do have them read a journal article that we wrote many years ago, but it's more of like, we don't even like the articles, so we want to hear how much they don't like the articles. So.
Yeah, and it's fun for them to poke at us a little bit. So we save it till the end so they're comfortable with us and they can just give us all the...
Yeah, they tell us how shitty our article is and we just sit there and take it.
Man.
No, it's just not. It's not a fair setup.
Yeah.
To have your own books there. I mean, well, you know why. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
It's an extreme power dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But lots of profs do it. They assign their own books that they've written.
I mean, I could understand if there's only one book in a particular subject, or just the one, but otherwise, I don't know. I think
I mean, it might be different if you were an editor of a book.
Sure.
You know, that's a little bit more removed so that you could test people on maybe another writer that's in the collection, but test them on your own work, I don't.
So how
Monty Python-ish.
Yeah. Especially if you don't cite it properly or
I'm here for an argument.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I won't. I won't argue.
So I was just thinking about this. How do you approach teaching creative writing for other people?
Mostly, it's really through a process of not so much teaching it as making a space available for reading of others, discussion of their work, looking at technique, and also just being really aware of a person's kind of style or, content, interest, and just like hands off in that area. Just hands off, let them explore, discover, come to their own voice, not my voice, their voice. I think it has a lot to do with, humility, but I also think it has to do with respecting other people and their own experience.
So for the creative writing course here at the university that you teach, is it one where students have to submit a portfolio before? Is it that course? Okay.
No. Well, we stopped doing that. We don't have portfolios anymore in the Write program, but they used to have portfolios.
Okay.
I will sometimes ask for a writing sample if somebody has not done any creative writing courses, but not always.
Have you ever ventured, Marilyn, into audiobook versions of your books?
Actually, no, I haven't, but, I've been recorded a fair amount of time, but there's no kind of complete audiobook. It's funny because I'm interested in sound, and so I'm surprised that I haven't done this, but I've often thought about it, just haven't had the time, and maybe just not as comfortable with the medium. But I really like it when there's I can work with a musician, and there's been a couple times where I've done that. One with Chris Dirksen, which was fantastic, and another group of Francophone writers at the festival in Trois-Rivières. They had a kind of a setup with a real xylophone and drums and something else. I can't remember, but it was great. I loved it, but I don't know. It's just not something I've organized or put enough effort into.
So what are you looking into for sound?
Sound, the reason I say I'm interested in sound is because poetry has so much to do with sound, but a lot of people just overlook that. I mean, it stems back to, to the origins of poetry, which were, spoken word, it's oral performance, it's, the bards, it's all of those things where it was music. Speaking was music. That's why I'm interested in sound. I mean, one of the things I do teach is that, it's not only the sense of the word, but the sound of the word that you're after in the process of putting a poem together. Because basically you're composing music out of some signifiers that mean something, but you are creating a musical score. And I don't do that. I don't have a background in music or anything. It's just a matter of, trial and error. Like I, write something that word needs to change. I try another word. Oh, that doesn't quite work. Oh, I change the whole line. Oh, that doesn't quite work. Oh, I change the whole stanza. That doesn't quite work. Or I change the whole poem. Oh, I'm getting closer. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's for me, I'm working towards melody as much as sense.
I feel like I just saw something of you working with like a local group from Edmonton, or you were reading poetry.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are they called?
Masinahikan.
Masinahikan, yeah. And I saw that and I was like, oh, that's because they're, what style of music do they do again? They're not...
It's kind of like avant-garde.
Yeah.
It's
interesting.
Experimental.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw like a YouTube video and I was like, oh, that's really cool.
It was fun. It was really fun. I mean, it's a lot of work because I had to
wow,
the way they shot that was crazy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because what happened is that they recorded me. How the hell did they do this again? They recorded my voice, and then they shot the video, and then they had to try to match the two up with me sitting there mouthing my previous recording. So we did that. We took that shot 20 times. It was crazy the way it was shot.
Yeah.
But because it was kind of put together as an afterthought.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But it ended up working, and Connor did a fantastic job.
Oh, Connor McNally? Yes.
Yeah.
He did an amazing job.
Yeah,
That
he's
is
great.
really hard to do.
Yes.
That's why I was like, oh God, will we ever finish this thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to you know what? I like to credit Connor for being one of the reasons that we're sitting here doing this book.
Yeah, he's
Oh,
actually
yes.
the reason why we created a podcast.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because
Cool.
it was honestly, it was originally supposed to be a video series, and I was supposed to interview 10 authors, and then publish the videos about it. And I wanted to hire an Indigenous filmmaker.
Right.
And I asked around, and obviously Connor's name came up, and I met with Connor for a coffee, and he basically told me, you can't afford me for this price. This
that's
is
a
way
lot.
way too little money for me to do this, and that's fair, and I'm glad that he did that.
Because making videos is so expensive, but also like Connor's
Time-consuming.
done so much work, and like he deserves to be paid like any Indigenous person. We deserve
Yeah,
to
of
be paid
course.
fairly. And podcasting, like a video series would have been great, but I think podcasting has turned out to be something that's just
It seems like a
It's
better
personal,
medium for
yeah.
it. Yeah.
yeah, it's been great.
I worked in video production, and it is a tremendous amount of work.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I spent a year on 3 20-minute sections. It's just so much work. It's unbelievable. And
Yeah.
it's so expensive. It used to be a
Yeah.
lot more expensive because people had to go into a studio, a post-production studio to get it done. And those things used to cost like so much money.
Yeah.
But now people can pretty much do it themselves with all that computer technology. But the days I did it, man, we used to have to rent those post-production places, and they were like unbelievably expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. I find video to be way more intimidating than sound. I don't know. Like, I do not want to watch it's hard for me to listen to the weird things that I do with my voice over and over again, but then to watch me act really weird at the same time, it's like, oh no, like,
Well, then you start to see all your mannerisms and your fidgets. You're like, why am I sitting still?
Yeah, exactly.
I felt weird doing that, and clearly I am weird.
Yeah.
Just painful.
It's like when you're at a conference or doing anything and somebody captures a photo of you and you don't know that it's happening. You're like, why do I look so angry right now?
Yeah.
Or like, I must be really bored. Like something's happening.
Why am I rolling my eyes?
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, oh no. Especially when that ends up on like Twitter or something like that, and they're like, Kayla's at this conference, and it's a photo of me rolling my eyes or just looking angry. I'm like, why would you choose to put that one up there? Like, I'm sure that I'm sure my face did not look like that for the whole entire hour. Like, and if it did, then something is wrong. You should have stopped this conversation immediately.
Yeah. I know.
So if you do an audio recording, do you think you would want to read it, or would you get somebody to read one of your books?
No, I'd read it.
Yeah.
I'd prefer to read it, I think,
Yeah.
than have someone else read it. It's so strange to have someone else read my work. It's like, oh, that's not my poem. It's just because the sound and sense are so connected.
Yeah.
It's really hard to have someone else read it.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot more, like, it's more personal when the author is actually reading it, because that's their words, their thoughts. So, but I have heard audiobooks that are like, it's just a random person reading it, and
it's weird.
Yeah,
it's not as good. It almost seems monotone, you know?
Yeah.
A big audio. I'm an audio learner. That's how I learn the most, which makes me the worst librarian ever. But yeah, I've listened to a lot of audiobooks, and some of them are terrible. It's almost like a robot listening. You're listening to a robot, and they have no emotions or whatever. And would not be good for your books.
No.
Right.
But then there's some audiobooks where you're listening to it and you're like, I didn't know that person's name was pronounced that way. Or you think that somebody reads with like somebody speaks with an accent or something like that, and then it just, for me, then it just destroys the whole book.
Yeah.
Because you come up with so many things in your mind. And I remember when they did the Hobbit movies, because I'm a huge like Tolkien fan, and I think Smaug is a male, and I was like, no, Smaug is a female. Like, that's always how I read the dragon, was being a female, not a male. So when they did in the movie adaptation, the dragon was a male, I'm like, this is completely wrong. Is that female on that pile of gold? That's a dragon. Like, that dragon is a girl. Like, I had like, and then my husband's like, it's a dragon. It can be whatever it wants to be. But the whole time watching the movie, just could not get past that. So I think,
I just wanted to go back to this work in progress about Indigenous Edmonton. I'm just wondering if there's anything in your process of like preparing to write it, or writing and researching, what has surprised you about Indigenous Edmonton?
I don't know if it hasn't been really surprise. I can't say it's been a surprise.
Yeah. I
mean, I'm not surprised that, Indigenous people were part of the thriving, socially stratified community that was here.
Right.
Right from the very beginning. So, no, it doesn't surprise me, actually. I mean, no.
Okay. Yeah.
No surprises. Well, is there anything that you would want people to know about Indigenous Edmonton?
Well, some of the things I find really interesting, Victoria Belcourt Calahoo, she was one of the first people to have a player piano in this area, and they were entrepreneurs. Her and her husband were entrepreneurs. They had a hotel, they had a pool hall, they had a farm, and she had this house with a player piano in it, and I was like, wow, really? And so for me, it was just really, piqued my imagination, thinking, wow, like, what did she play on that player piano, and who was there, and that kind of thing. So, so those kinds of things are I find very interesting, but I don't know if it's so much surprising.
Yeah, I think your book will be a good medium for some people who just want to learn more about like the Indigenous history of Edmonton, but it's a great like form that's not, going to the museum or reading a history book that's super academic in content, because I mean, I'll read those books if I'm taking a history course, but I would rather read something that's a little bit lighter or just not so intense.
More accessible.
Yeah,
more accessible.
More accessible, right? Because we were having a conversation about like the way that academics write and how it's not accessible for everybody. And I think even the way academics speak is not accessible. And there's sometimes that it goes over my head. Or when we were talking about overthinking things, where I'm like, no, you're really reading into that. Like, yeah, like community members, including myself, are just, it's not so complex.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I'm very excited to read your book because I love history, so I cannot wait.
About that player piano, I don't know why, but in my head, just because ghosts are a part of my life, and I just imagine this player piano just starting to play randomly all the time, and it would scare the shit out of me.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like when the shower starts, but it's a player piano playing. I don't know why my mind went that way, but it did. Marilyn, we have, I guess, 2 final questions to ask you.
Oh, okay.
The first question is, would you have any advice for people working in the editing and publishing industry on how to work respectfully with Indigenous peoples?
Huge question. Yeah, no, I don't think I can have any kind of umbrella statement. It really depends on the group, right? And the cultural group that the person they're writing about. I think it really has a lot to do with that. You know, what are their protocols? What's their territory? Or what's their conflict with another Indigenous group that is also claiming that territory? You know, like they have to be mindful of these kinds of things. And so I guess I would say go and do the research. Go and talk to Indigenous people in the area where this book is set, or somebody that has some kind of information about it that's Indigenous and that is Indigenous in terms of being in the community. You know, because people can get Indigenous people and they don't have any connection to the community.
That doesn't help.
It doesn't help.
Right.
So then I guess the last question is, do you have any advice for any Indigenous folks who are wanting to get into the publishing, editing, and writing of Indigenous stories and storytelling?
Read as much as possible. Read widely. Read the, contemporary as well as the older work. Because what's happening now is that people are more focused on contemporary work, and they forget about people like Jeanette Armstrong, Lee Miracle, Maria Campbell. I mean, these people cut a wide swath for us. And I just want them to be acknowledged. But right now, the focus is really on the more contemporary stuff, and which is great. But I don't think we can lose sight of the fact that there are people who allowed me to be able to publish my work and get it out there.
Can't lose sight of the Métis aunties.
No,
Yes,
absolutely not. Oh my God, no. No. I mean, I remember going, Jeanette Armstrong has been she's been a real role model for me as someone who is really very strongly connected to her community, and has been someone who basically, it's been a real model for me of how to carry myself, how to be in my own community, all of those things.
So read and get yourself a mentor if you
Yeah,
can.
read as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Yeah.
Read poetry if you want to write poetry.
Yeah, exactly. That's good.
I know,
That's
right?
very good advice. So, unless we have any other burning, pressing questions, does anyone? No? Well, thank you very much for being here, Marilyn. We're very excited to have you on as our last guest of Masinahikan and Iskwêwak Bookwomen for the year, season 1.
Fantastic.
Season 1, we'll have one more episode about our favorite moments of the year and just reflecting back. So keep your ears open for that one and your eyes watching our Twitter and Facebook and just about everything else that we have. Also, look forward for some exciting things that we will be doing in the fall that we'll talk about later, and some possible merch collaborations that will be coming out eventually. So, yeah, if we ever get this graphics thing down, that's another thing. So I guess Métis Auntie's out for the day, and have a great whatever your day is, your afternoon, morning, evening, whenever you're listening to this.